Chapter 10 Christmas. He felt infinitely guilty, wondered if Danny and Elle would read in his eyes what had happened, but everything seemed so normal, as if the world hadn't shifted at all. The dry spell had been broken and the veldt had seemingly changed overnight, turned green like it had never been dull and brown. It was his first Christmas not celebrated in a mess hall in years, and he felt out of place. He didn't know how to act. Louise had gone from his cousin's friend to... He couldn't call her his girlfriend. No promises had been made. His lover, he supposed. He flinched. He disliked the word. He'd never called even Melissa that in his mind. She looked lovely. She wore a turquoise dress that made her eyes look like some tropical seascape, and as always the red lipstick that had become fashionable since Hitler was said to hate red lipstick. He rather thought that Auntie Marta didn't quite approve of Louise. There was a funny look in her eyes when she looked at Lou. He was also pretty sure that she didn't quite approve of him either. It was fair, he supposed. He had brought turmoil into her life. He had brought the threat of her Eleanor and Tamra being taken away, and though the threat had passed, the first impression of him seemingly hadn't. He watched the people around him. He had always been a people watcher, and these ones were his own people by choice. He had had a hand in their lives for so long. It had been he who had introduced his cousin to Danny, his friend and wingman in the Battle of Britain. It had been he who had walked Eleanor down the aisle when she and Danny had first gotten married. It had been him she had called when the telegram came that Danny had been killed in the Pacific. He who had picked up her pieces until she had run away and married Albert Nell for the sake of Tamra. And 3 years later, a short few weeks ago, it had been to him that Danny had come first when he had made his way back from the island in the Pacific that he had survived on, against all odds. Their story and his were intertwined inextricably, and he loved them deeply and passionately and with the poetry of his Irish heart. They were his family, his cousin and his brother. Yet he was lonely. Them picking up the threads of their life was intimate, and he figuring out what he was going to do with his life was also intimate, lonely business. Louise. He looked at her sitting next to Marta on the couch and bouncing Tamra on her knee. She was telling her about the new foal. He wanted to show her the earth from above. She'd called to arrange it. Kissed him when she told him that it was on. He'd stayed with her another night in the dark little house, and the prospect of flying had made him dream. It had been the old dream of the Focke-Wulf, and she'd shaken him awake, held him to her, kissed him, and the dream had been forgotten. She had asked no questions, no promises or commitment of him. She just gave of herself, and all of it was love. She didn't have to say the words. Arranging for him to fly, loving him with her body and her eyes through the storm, trusting him. It was a kind of love he hadn't known before, yet thought he'd loved Melissa, yet thought he'd loved the girl who had left him on that night long, long ago when he'd met Danny. He couldn't even remember her name now. Louise had seared herself into his being. It was like the lightning that had lit the veldt on fire, a light that glowed against his eyelids even when he closed them. This was it. And yet how many times had he been stupid before? He'd asked Melissa to marry him years ago. He'd asked Eleanor to marry him when she told him she was going to marry Albert. He'd been foolish so many times. He'd known Louise 2 weeks now, and he was going to ask her. But this time he'd do it right. He'd court her. He'd show her the sky. He'd get to know her. He'd do it right and go back to that creepy, dark little house in a few months or a year, because this time he'd not rush it. He'd do it right. And he'd go talk to her father and ask him for her hand the right way. He'd do right by Louise because he didn't think anyone except her grandfather had ever really done right by her. He'd give her what Danny had given Eleanor, a proper gentlemanly courtship and a white wedding if she'd have him. He wouldn't let what he'd done ruin her. He wouldn't mess this up, even if they'd slightly jumped the gun with what had happened in the storm over the weekend. He would do everything right from here on.